The American University. For several centuries, our universities turned out bold thinkers who changed the world. From before the hopeful birth of our nation to the difficult struggle for equality, generations of great leaders sprung up from our nation's campuses. Traditionally, the mission of higher education has been to equip students with the tools necessary to think critically. Educators believed that a better society would result when people had the freedom to debate the great challenges of their time. Colleges embodied the very philosophy upon which our nation was founded, and educators recognized that their academic freedom was made possible by America's freedom. So when our country needed help, universities answered the call.
1,500 colleges throughout the nation are being converted to the war effort. In consultation with faculty and advisory officers, students are guided to the specialized training they need for war work. Servicemen with books, now a common sight on the campus.
My, how times have changed. In the wake of September 11th, a number of college campuses outlawed the display of American flags. Lehigh University removed the flag from school buses and told employees that displaying the flag is not allowed. At Central Michigan University, school officials forced students to remove flags from their dorm room doors. Arizona State removed an American flag from a cafeteria over worries that it might offend foreign students. And at Holy Cross, a secretary was told to remove a flag from her desk. She was a friend of Todd Beamer, who was killed on September 11th while trying to retake a hijacked plane. How did our campuses get this way? Was my old school like this? I decided to take a little road trip to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. If you're a hardcore fan of The Sopranos, you may remember Lewisburg for two things. Jackie Aprile spent some time there in the Lewisburg Penitentiary, and Meadow paid a visit to the town to take a tour of my alma mater, Bucknell University. I loved my 4 years at Bucknell, but I've been hearing some disturbing things lately, and I wanted to go see for myself.
America is a racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted country. Has a lot of currency here.
A lot of our students, I think, are unconsciously racist.
A few administrators have written to the local papers saying that Some of us are racists.
It's not conscious, so they don't really see it in themselves.
People don't have any idea just how bad it is.
And nobody wants to admit that they're unconsciously a racist.
You hear all these things about, the evils of capitalism, blah, blah, blah.
There are still lots of Marxists studying and writing and lots of journals and things within the economics profession.
You never hear about the evils of communism. You never hear about the piles of bodies.
Yeah, imagine your typical very wealthy Bucknell student taking a course which is a critique of capitalism and often saying things like, your parents are doing awful things to people around the globe, either indirectly or directly.
Capitalism oppresses the individual. Marxism would empower the individual.
We go through the basic ideas of Marx and then updates of Marx and some of the feminist and black feminist political economy and black political economy, which kind of starts with Marxism and then goes off in different directions from there.
I'm an econ major. I've never been assigned Hayek. I've never been assigned Mises. I've never been assigned Friedman.
Black political economists and feminist political economists have improved, I think, on basic standard Marxist ideas, and that they expose the fact that Marxist ideas haven't always dealt with race very effectively, for example, or with gender.
I know one person here, ever, that I've met, who has read Friedrich Hayek. One person.
Some of the most cutting-edge work in economics today is being done in feminist economics and in black political economy. So the students should be exposed, you would think, to the cutting-edge work in the discipline.
If you're required to study this stuff about Marxism and you're required to study Marx in this much detail, that is a value judgment.
We feel like they need to be exposed to this. This is really good stuff. This is stuff that they will benefit from learning, but it's going to conflict with their preconceived notions.
I feel like we only get one point of view.
If you were to look through the course book, you'd see across departments, there's tons of courses on gender issues, sex issues. You can't just take general history or sociology.
In too many cases, you end up with people who turn a class that is not political and make it political. I believe it was an engineering class of some sort, and it turned into a screed about how George Bush invaded Afghanistan to build an oil pipeline across the country. This was a professor who went on about it for 45 minutes in an engineering class.
Do you raise your hand and be like, excuse me, professor, I disagree with you, in a class where it's out of place already?
I think a lot of it's made up. I think that a lot of the bias is in the eye of the beholder.
It's not every class. Can't forget that, but it's way too often.
These are respected university professors, and they're either controlling our grades or their colleagues are.
I find when students come out of high school, they have no ability to engage in critical thinking. None. They are used to spouting back what teachers tell them.
If everyone here who's in a position of authority and is supposed to be respected is saying these things, then of course it's going to start to sink in.
It's just breathtaking how one-sided things can be here.
Our big danger is the trustees. Our trustees have made noises every now and then about interfering in the curriculum and making sure that we have enough different perspectives.
You ought to want a full flowering of ideas and all viewpoints. It's interesting that so many folks apparently don't.
The chairman of our board of trustees right now, Susan Crawford, has, for example, said at times that we need to make sure that Bucknell has a sufficiently diverse curriculum, and has proposed maybe that we need an American Studies major, implicitly meaning American Studies should be about celebrating America. In other words, it should be a political perspective almost.
Universities used to not be like this. They didn't used to be strongholds of any particular ideological bent.
We were trained in these areas, and to have somebody who does not know our field tell us what we should be teaching is the height of arrogance.
Bucknell's thought of as pretty mainstream. It's certainly not the kind of school you'd expect to be far out there politically. So if students at Bucknell feel they're being indoctrinated, what does it say about all the other seemingly normal campuses around the country? Next stop on the road trip, San Luis Obispo, California, the home of Cal Poly. Cal Poly recently gained notoriety when the school tried to punish a student for posting a flyer announcing an upcoming event. The local college Republicans had invited conservative author Mason Weaver to come speak.
We brought Mason Weaver just because we wanted somebody that was going to be dynamic. We didn't want, you know, somebody stiff up there to give a boring lecture about tax policy or something. Just the title of his book was provocative enough. It's okay to leave the plantation. It's about economic freedom, the new Underground Railroad. And the new Underground Railroad being capitalism, free markets. And that was the whole premise of his book. It had a catchy title, it was provocative, and that's what we need to get people at our events. We advertise on campus with flyers. Took the title of his book and put it in quotes with the picture under it. Said, "Come here, Mason Weaver." We plastered the flyers all over campus, like we do for every speaker. We'll put up flyers, and the next day they'll be gone. We put stake signs in the ground. I've seen people ride by on their bikes and just kick them over and break them. We'll put stake signs up. The next day, we'll see them all sticking out of the trash can. I don't think that other flyers get torn down quite as vigorously as ours do. There's flyers up for any leftist cause you can imagine, and they stay up, and there's no problem. They don't have to go out 4 or 5 times before an event and repost them. I carry flyers around, and so as I'm walking across campus, if I see flyers where I put them up before they're gone, I put them back up, and that was the case with the Multicultural Center. That particular day when I went by, they were gone. Like, they were on a lot of the bulletin boards on campus, so I walked by and went in to post it. The student not so kindly told me I couldn't post it on the bulletin board.
One of the students in there recognized the flyer.
I'd posted flyers in there before. I put 2 flyers in there, and there was no problem.
She confronted Steve and basically told him to take his flyer and go, and if he refused to do so, she would call the police.
You can't post that flyer in here because that flyer is offensive, and we have a right to not be offended.
She mentioned the flyer as being an example of hate speech.
Do you think that people have a right not to be offended?
Nobody has a right to not be offended. I'm offended every day in class when I hear professors bash my views.
What was her objection?
The content of the flyer, that it was offensive to her. The use of the word plantation.
I just tried to explain to him that this was the title of his book. This is a speaking event. You guys can come. There's a question and answer period. I want people to come. That's why I was posting the flyer.
He wanted to talk to them, and they said, well, if you don't understand why this flyer is offensive to us, we don't have anything to talk about.
They told me to leave. The student said, I'm going to leave or call the police. And she says, no, second thought, I'm calling the police.
There are constructive ways of dealing with that anger, not calling the police on Steve for hanging a flyer.
The police report stated that a young white male was posting racial material. That's what they said, offensive racial material.
It happens to be the title of his book. It's okay to leave the plantation. So it wasn't the flyer per se, it was Mason Weaver's book title on the flyer.
So I left.
He called me very frantically. He said that they had called the police.
The police did actually show up.
He was very upset, and he asked me what he should do.
There's been a complaint against it. You need to come to Judicial Affairs, and they would not tell me what it was. You need to make an appointment for this week to talk to the director of Judicial Affairs. This is during my finals week. I called my parents. I said, listen, I think I'm in some kind of trouble here. I don't know what's going on, but I want you guys to be here. My parents drove 2.5 hours to get here. We went to the meeting, and they wouldn't let us videotape the meeting. They didn't want any record of this meeting. It was myself, both of my parents, the Director of Judicial Affairs, Ardith Tregenza, and the Vice President of Student Affairs, Cornell Morton. He referred to me as an identifiable young white male member of the Cal Poly College Republicans. And he says, although it's not exclusively white or male, there's some implications. You know, a white male, blonde-haired and blue-eyed, that was a flashpoint for these students' anger. That was the exact word. Just me being white, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed, that I was somehow prone to offend people that didn't look like me. We're all students of the same age. We all go to the same school. There was more the same about us than was different. I've never thought, okay, this person doesn't look like me, they're automatically going to hate me, or they're going to not like me, or I'm going to somehow just offend them by being in their presence. At one point, he suggested to my parents, he looked at my dad and suggested that I was maybe raised in a manner to not treat other people respectfully. They wanted me to see a university psychologist to discuss emotional barriers. I have some emotional disorder because I'm conservative. Something's got to be wrong with me. You need to write letters of apology to these students and make an appointment with the psychologist. They handed me a sheet which listed everything from verbal reprimand all the way to permanent expulsion from the CSU system. Your punishment could get worse. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to write these letters and I'm not going to make that appointment. Well, you have until Tuesday. Tuesday came and went. I got a letter saying that the hearing was scheduled.
It was very unfortunate on the part of Cal Poly. They, I think, in their own minds realized that it was a First Amendment issue and that they couldn't do anything straightforward with Steve.
It's clear the university wants to charge him with something. And they struggle for a while trying to figure out what. I think maybe it was sometime in December when they come up with the theory of this was a disruption of a meeting. And this is the first that Steve heard of this being a meeting.
Supposedly they had a meeting that was supposed to start at 7. And I entered at like 6:45, maybe I was there for 2-3 minutes tops, and left. And they said that they were so, I guess, just distraught, they couldn't have their meeting at 7. When they did finally get their meeting started, when the police showed up, that was a disruption. And so since I was the reason for calling the police, that disrupted their meeting.
They called the police, And when the police showed up, they complained that the police showing up was a disruption.
In the hearing, I sat right there while they said that when the police came, that further disrupted their meeting.
Nobody could come in and say he was rude. Nobody said he threw some kind of shouting tantrum. They said he was professional.
It wasn't about my conduct. I was very civil. I asked them if they wanted to sit down and talk about it. I said, please. I said, thank you. I wasn't violent or rude in any way.
So nobody could point their finger at Steve and say he misbehaved.
The police report did not contain any of the claims that they made subsequent to...
No, it was all about the flyer. Everything was about the flyer. It was nothing about a meeting. It was nothing about disruption. It was just, this is racial material that he's posting on campus.
I think we knew going in, and I had advised Steve going in, do not expect this to have a happy ending.
I was in there with myself and Dr. Freeberg.
My role there was to advise Steve as I could because they refused to let him have an attorney present.
The person who was presiding over the case was an attorney. He wasn't allowed to have an attorney of his own.
An attorney is asking me questions, trying to interrogate me. The director of judicial affairs is there. She does this. This is her living. This is what she does, is interrogate students.
Given the stakes to his academic career and his reputation, he should have had an attorney present.
This was not fair. This was not set up with intention to be fair.
I was walking in there blind. I had a yellow legal pad and a pen.
Well, we had quite a bit of testimony. We had a 7-hour hearing.
There were many amazing moments, not the least of which was when Steve Hinkle asked Artist Fregenza what disruption actually meant.
I asked her, I said, well, what's your definition of disruption? I'm being charged with a disruption of a campus event. She says, I don't see how that applies to this case. And she just laughed it off and says,
gosh, I feel like I'm on Jeopardy. That's what comes to mind at 4 o'clock with no caffeine.
And she says, I don't know, I'm not a dictionary.
You don't need to be a lawyer to understand that if you can't even define what somebody is charged with, you have a little bit of a problem.
And they found me guilty, obviously.
Well, they found him guilty of disruption, which was ridiculous enough. We feel like the whole process was a large part of the punishment. You know, like a 7-hour hearing for trying to post a flyer is not acceptable.
They dropped the charge of seeing a psychologist.
But of course, it was still in his transcript. He was found guilty of something absolutely absurd.
I knew he was right. And we had a lot of conversations about what was in his best interests.
They wanted him to write an apology.
I told him his back was against the wall, that if he had to write a public letter of apology, that would haunt him with the internet for a lot of years.
How would this have looked? Would it have looked that some students acted irrationally on campus and called the police, and the university was, was trying to get at the college Republicans, and I was abused by leftist administrators? Certainly not. It would have came back as, here's Steve Hinkle, who has a problem with black people, and he had to have the police called on him because he was putting up racist material. I didn't want that on my record. I'm not going to start out my career as a young adult having that skeleton in my closet.
He was prepared to let Cal Poly, kick him out.
I didn't know what was going to happen to me. There was completely the possibility that I was going to get kicked out of school for this, or I was going to even get suspended.
After they found him guilty, he contacted us. I frankly thought that it was going to be another case that we resolved in like 10 minutes. We've caught them red-handed. They've got to back down. This is absurd.
Fire warned them that it was going to come out in the media unless they solved this, and the university didn't heed their warning.
Fire got involved, and it hit the news.
It was on Fox News, it was on CNN, LA Times.
Cal Poly was savaged in the press.
After a lot of media attention, the university sent me a letter. They're not going to pursue the charges anymore.
We succeeded in getting them to give up on trying to get the apology.
But they didn't say they were dropping the case. So I still had this guilty charge on my record.
The university not just taking the additional step of saying, and we're going to expunge this from his records, that would have ended the case.
Fire basically says you need to expunge the student's record. You need to make this right. They refused to do it.
Amazingly, they didn't decide to do that, and that's when we had to move on to litigation.
Fire brought me into contact with Center for Individual Rights.
And we contacted our illustrious legal network member, Carol Sobel, who's a longtime ACLU attorney.
An attorney out here in California that filed the case in federal court.
This was not a case Cal Poly was going to win.
They didn't listen to us for almost a year. They listened to the judge and said, okay, we're going to settle.
We told them almost a year before, you don't stand a chance in this case. This is not a close call.
My record had to be expunged. My legal fees had to be paid.
They lost on every single possible grounds.
I mean, I went from them having complete power of, potentially being able to kick me out of school to now them having to pay me $40,000.
$40,000 out of the taxpayer's pocket.
Cal Poly was just an amazing case. They dummied up charges. They held a ridiculous hearing.
People were moving forward on Steve just out of sheer emotion.
It was something that they had worked very hard to try to figure out something they could get him on.
It had nothing to do with his disrupting a meeting that wasn't starting for another half hour.
The administration wanted to send a message to all the students that this could be you.
Imagine that message. I'm just out posting flyers for one of our events, and I could get kicked out of school.
Why should I put my entire future and my entire academic career in jeopardy just because I'm hanging a flyer for the college Republicans?
If I was a freshman and I saw that, I'm thinking, I'm not going to get involved in this group. I'm not going to go post flyers. My parents would kill me.
If any time you posted a flyer, you had to consider the risk of having a 7-hour hearing, nobody would post flyers.
They had tried on a number of different occasions to essentially shut down the college Republicans.
Right, exactly. And they've done it as a group, and they'd always been unsuccessful. And I think now they saw this as an opportunity to get at one of the members.
I personally think that part of the motivation for going after Steve is, well, if we can't get the club as an institution, we can discourage people from participating in it.
This is a perfect example of how hypocritical it is to want diversity but not diversity of ideas.
Were they opposed to Steve's being a white conservative, or were they opposed to Mason Weaver being a black conservative?
All of the above.
This happens on every college campus. This happens to a lot of students.
So there is something very worrisome about a university that would teach students that in a situation where someone's posting a flyer they disagree with, to call the cops.
Yeah, they like calling the cops out there at Cal Poly. Let's just say I found out the hard way. Hello, I'm looking for some university official to comment on the Stephen Hinkle case.
That would be public affairs you need to go to.
Thanks a lot. Hi, how are you? My name's Evan Maloney. I'm working on a documentary film, and I've been trying for a number of months to get administrators from Cal Poly to speak on the Stephen Hinkle case. And to date, nobody's returned my phone calls or emails. I'm trying to find someone who's willing to comment on the case. All of the people who are involved in the case don't seem willing to talk. I guess I could meet you in the front lobby. Okay, thanks a lot. Take care.
Are you film crew?
Yes, hi. Evan Maloney.
Can I talk to you?
Yes,
Hi.
very nice to meet you.
I'm Teresa Hendricks.
Hi,
I'm from
Teresa.
Public Affairs. Here's the statement.
Could you read it for us?
No, I gotta give it to you.
You can't read the statement?
No, but that's the
Can I?
statement that we're giving everybody.
There's no apology here for Mr. Hinkle.
That's the statement, and you're welcome to film anywhere on campus. So, good luck.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cal Poly never did apologize to Stephen Hinkle, and they still refuse to admit they did anything wrong. But in my experience, people usually don't shell out $40,000 for no reason at all. And if they stand by what they did, why wouldn't anyone talk on camera? I couldn't even get them to read their own statement. Well, the nice PR lady did say I could film anywhere on campus. Maybe Cal Poly's president would have the courage to explain the school's actions. I was wondering if we might be able to speak with the university president.
Hi. Would you please put that down? Put it down now. Come on.
So I take it we can't speak with the university president?
Who are you?
My name's Evan Maloney. Nice to meet you.
From which organization?
I'm an independent filmmaker.
Well, good for you.
Do you have anything to say to the taxpayers of California for the $40,000 that was spent in the Hinkle case?
Please come with me.
There's nothing that you want to say to the taxpayers of California as to why you spent $40,000 to persecute one of your students politically?
I'd be pleased to make available.
All you need to do is make a comment. This was wrong. Can you at least say this was wrong?
Make available a comment from an officer of the university, but I am not prepared to comment myself. Michelle, would you please call the public safety office? You do not have an appointment to see.
But I couldn't get an appointment.
You don't have an appointment to see the president?
No one would respond to my requests.
Well, I understand your frustration, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with an appropriate university official. The president is not available to speak with you now.
Well, he was just in there, it looks like, just kind of sitting
The
around.
president is not available to speak with you at this time. Certainly welcome to go and speak to our Director of Public Affairs, Leah Colt. We'll be glad to respond to your questions.
Okay, so I have your word that they'll speak with me today?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. I
I'm
appreciate
sorry
it.
this has not been a civil visit, and I appreciate
I think it's
your
been
interest,
civil.
and you're welcome to go.
Why do you think it hasn't been civil?
Because you came up here and demanded an audience with the president of the university.
I was wondering if we might be able to speak with the university president. If no one will return my emails, if no one will respond to my phone calls, what other recourse do I have than to show up?
I've directed you to the public affairs office.
Well, you say this isn't civil. I think this is remarkably civil. I'm not.
Well, then I'll shake your hand. If you believe it's civil, then let's part company on civil terms. And you're welcome to go to the public affairs office.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right.
That guy was pretty funny. He was like a character in a movie.
Hi.
I guess now he is a character in a movie.
Well, good for you.
Of course, I forgot he told his assistant to call the police.
Please call the public safety office.
And they soon surprised our cameraman from behind. We never did make it down to the public affairs office.
You need to leave or you're going to go to jail. Okay?
All right.
So you need to grab your stuff. Let's go. Get in your cars. You need to roll. I can't comment on anything.
We're traveling to a number of different schools where students have been harassed because of their political views, and you know, so this was one of the schools, obviously, that was on the list. If they don't want to respond to phone calls or email, I don't know what else I can do other than show up in person.
I'm not biased in this case, brother, but we got to do what we got to do. Here's what's going to happen. You guys need to go off campus and stay off campus, because if you come back, you know, you're going to subject yourself to being arrested. Okay, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, sir.
It was good meeting you guys, but I hope I don't see you again.
Likewise.
You know what I'm saying?
Nothing personal.
Right.
Take care. Well, the good thing about getting kicked off campus is I got the rest of the day off. And I guess Steve was celebrating too. It was that very morning when his victory over Cal Poly was announced. But for Greg Lukianoff at Fire, it's all in a day's work.
Students are being told that they have fewer rights than they do, and that when they engage in clearly protected speech, very standard tame speech, they're being punished. And that is not acceptable in a free society. We've been involved in literally hundreds of cases. We've helped thousands upon thousands of students. We've made a lot of converts in our short existence. There are certainly people who at one point said, "Oh, there's no free speech problem on campus," who have either stopped saying that or have completely come over to the other side.
Many of Fire's cases involve speech codes, obscure rules used by university administrators to punish students who express unpopular opinions.
Speech code is a rule or regulation at a university that violates a substantial amount of protected speech, or what would be protected speech, in the larger society. Speech codes are a complete scandal.
Fire recently studied nearly 200 schools and found that 89% of them have speech codes. Brown University outlaws statements that make people feel impotent, angry, or disenfranchised. Colby College prohibits anything that could lead to a loss of self-esteem. The University of Connecticut banned inappropriate laughter. And West Virginia University warns incoming freshmen not to use terms like boyfriend and girlfriend. The school says those are too gender-specific. Terms like lover and partner are encouraged.
We've seen an awful lot of them where Christian students have been ruthlessly mocked, where conservative students obviously have been too, and nobody's crying hate speech in those situations. I'm politically liberal. That like a lot of the people who work with Fire we get criticism from of people who don't know Fire very well, saying, "Oh, you know, you obviously have a conservative bias. So many of your cases are conservative." A pro-affirmative action rally at Berkeley is not going to be shut down. The kind of speech that gets censored or punished on campus, the kind of speech that Fire defends in the larger society, no even liberal Democrat would think that could be punished. And it's really unfortunate and really kind of bizarre that there are people out there who call themselves liberals who believe in crushing speech that they don't like.
But it happens all the time on American campuses. It happened recently at Bucknell.
Anything which is intimidating, which is going to poison the campus environment, can't be allowed.
You can't annoy someone.
It's essentially up to them. It can be enforced selectively, and it is enforced selectively, I would say, on a partisan basis.
You want to encourage free speech, but if one person's free speech intimidates somebody else and keeps them from speaking, then it's a different issue. Campuses have gone further to try and foster a better climate.
How is harassment defined here at Bucknell?
If you're offended by it, that's implicitly considered harassment.
You never know what's going to be offensive.
100 years ago, it was offensive to say blacks were the same as whites. Does that mean we shouldn't have been able to say it? Of course not.
I mean, we're all sort of paranoid to a certain degree about what we say in certain forums.
People hesitate, and you wonder about what you've said. You wonder if there's going to be repercussions.
The student makes their case to a particular person who's in charge of the judicial hearings.
You go in front of a few students and a few professors. I'm actually on this board, so I've seen a lot of them.
You have witnesses called for both sides, and there's a formal hearing.
You're not allowed to have a lawyer. Sometimes it's very difficult to have your due process rights there, so it's really scary.
You're usually sentenced, you're usually required to undergo some sort of sensitivity training.
I was actually brought up on charges by the dean of students also, so I've seen both sides of it.
You can't speak out one way or the other, either in favor or against the speech code. The university has essentially instituted a gag rule.
We had a huge problem with the counterweight, our paper. We published an issue about the speech code.
There was, a big to-do over the counterweight, and so our dean of students held a meeting. He invited sort of the preeminent liberal groups, or at least that are easily identifiable as liberal.
There was a secret meeting at which I was threatened. Denise was threatened.
We had the deans yelling at us, the different university administrators just yelling at us in a group of angry students.
What kind of threats did you hear from the other students at this meeting?
Stuff along the lines of, I really want to punch you right now.
Some of them have just been really mean to me because of my beliefs, and I can handle them being mean to me, but to have a university employee just attacking me on a personal level.
And the administrator who threatened you, is this person still with the university?
Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, so maybe it's not really a threat. What she said to me was, I was lucky that the other students there were such good kids, or else I could have gotten hurt.
I think that's wildly inappropriate of an administrator to do that.
After about 45 minutes, this guy Ferraro turned to me. I was the editor of the counterweight at that time, and he said, knowing how upset people are, would you run these articles again? These articles saying that the speech code is bad. And I said, yeah, I would.
Dean Ferraro was incensed.
He told us to leave. We kind of did one of those, like, how can you do this? And it's not like we were refusing, we were just flabbergasted. He threatened to call the cops.
Clearly revealed that he wasn't impartial.
Right after that, I had to go through this trial, so I find it a little hard to believe that there's not some relationship there. It went on for months. I was resoundingly acquitted. Fire wrote a letter to support me. All kinds of students testified that it was nonsense.
There have been a few incidents where kind of bad things have happened, and they've ignored it.
Somebody chalked outside the student union, die BUCC, die Bucknell Conservatives Club. Of course, nothing happened.
One of our members, Allison Kasich, she was the secretary at the time, she had some kind of conservative sign on her door.
A person wrote Nazi party on it, maybe a swastika too.
Nothing ever came of it.
There have been a lot of swastikas drawn around about us.
If they were to decide a conservative was harassed, I think a lot of people on campus would be shocked by that.
A student drove back from the mall, which is 20 minutes south of here, a student of Asian descent, and felt like he or she was being tailed.
And the next day, there was an all-campus email saying, oh no, watch out for this.
I hope the student wasn't being tailed, and I hope especially that the student wasn't being tailed because of their race, but there was no evidence, but it didn't need evidence.
There wasn't any all-campus email saying, watch out for people drawing swastikas on your door.
Whatever they're going to do, they ought to do it equitably. If they're going to panic every time somebody feels offended or threatened or whatever, why is it that it has to be done on such a partisan, selective basis?
Well, I can't answer that question, Charles. But on another road trip, I discovered that Bucknell isn't the only place that selectively enforces speech codes. At the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, You'd better be careful when choosing your Halloween costume.
Everybody was dressed up in Halloween costumes. It was right before Halloween.
Members of fraternity that were going to a party and they dressed up like the Jackson 5.
5 members from Jackson, Tennessee, and they decided to dress up as the Jackson 5 because that's how they were known.
They were going to dress up as somebody for Halloween, so that's who they chose.
They were dressed as the Jackson 5, but they as part of their costumes, they were in blackface.
Right. I don't think they were doing anything to, degrade black people.
It happened over a weekend, and then on the following Monday, they were reprimanded.
And the university ended up suspending the entire fraternity.
The party didn't even take place on campus.
It was dealt with pretty harshly.
If 3 black guys had chosen to paint their faces white and dress up as the Bee Gees, whether everybody would have gotten offended. I doubt it.
Now, the man does have a point.
White chicks. You know them girls ain't gonna be there. Oh, they'll be there. They'll have to do the unthinkable.
What's up, money? You got a problem?
Okay, so maybe the people running UT have no sense of humor.
Lefty administrators are the Dean Wormers of the 21st century. In movies like Animal House, it was some sort of pretentious establishment twit, and now it's a different sort of pretentious establishment twit.
The Dean Wormers over at UT were running a pretty tight ship. After coordinating with the fraternity's national organization, the chapter was kicked off campus. Punishing an entire fraternity because a few of its members made a poor choice in Halloween costumes? That's a harsh penalty. So you can imagine what happened when this student was the target of emails calling him a raghead terrorist and suggested that he be shot in the face.
Nothing has been done about that.
Nothing has been done.
Absolutely nothing.
At the University of Tennessee, wearing the wrong Halloween costume can result in a punishment, but a student who sends an email talking about shooting people in the face gets off scot-free? Why is that?
I mean, he is an outspoken conservative, writing for our paper.
I often write in defense of the United States in the face of much of its criticism that it gets disproportionately more on campus than I think in the rest of our culture.
Sigmani, they're not sympathetic to just because he has a point of view which they don't agree with.
I believe that the reason no action was taken was because Sigmani is an outspoken conservative.
That's the only thing I could make of it.
It seems that the administration's policy is hate speech is wrong against certain people.
The trouble began with an editorial Soukmani wrote for the school paper. In it, he was critical of the Issues Committee, the arm of the university responsible for bringing speakers to campus.
They are almost always far left ideologues.
Parents were probably unaware that they're paying for people to come to the school and tell their kids that the United States is the equivalent of the Nazi Party, literally.
They get an absolutely insane amount of money to bring people here.
Approximately $100,000.
They get all their money from student activities fees. So they're 100% funded by students.
The campus as a whole has no say in who gets on the Issues Committee.
Not at all.
Existing members vote on who to let in. So if the Issues Committee leans left now, chances are in 10 years it'll still lean left.
People who graduated from the University of Tennessee in 1983, 1985, they had the same complaints when they were students.
People apply to the committee and then they interview them and they select who gets on it.
I personally have never interviewed with them. This is just what one of my friends had told me, but they asked him if he could kill any president, what president would he kill and how.
Really?
Yeah.
Soukmani had written an article in the Beacon about the bias of the Issues Committee and in terms of who they bring to campus to speak and everything else.
He's kind of a pioneer in really going after the Issues Committee and staying after them.
It really blindsided them. I don't think they ever expected anybody to question them.
That probably didn't make him very popular at the administration.
Popularity. What is it made of? How does a person get to be popular with lots of people and have a few close friends, too? Let's watch and see what makes people like one person and not another.
Say, Reggie, did you know that Archie is a conservative? That's not too keen, Jughead. Doesn't he listen to what the adults say here in school? Gee, I guess not, Reggie. Otherwise he'd know that only stupid people are conservative. He's a real square. Yeah, a real square. If he knew it was good for him, he'd wise up and believe what they told him to believe. Say, that'd be swell. Then he'd be popular.
A friend of Submani's, who was a conservative, was the token conservative on the issues committee for a while, couldn't get anything done, couldn't get a word in edgewise, and got frustrated and resigned. But they left him on the email list.
Unfortunately for them, they left me on the email list. I was receiving all of the emails that started circulating immediately after Submani's article ran.
A lot of profanity and just attacking Submani and his religion.
The discourse between the members deteriorated pretty quickly.
This kid, I guess, made a comment over email. He wrote a comment to the rest of the group.
He said, the next time you see one of these ragheads, shoot him right in the fucking face. It really seemed to me that they were wanting to go after Submani.
I can only imagine what Submani goes through. He wears a turban every day. He has a long beard. People would expect him to hold certain views, which he doesn't.
I'm sure he gets confused with being a Muslim all the time. People don't know as much about Sikhs as they do about Muslims.
His background would have been perfectly acceptable had he followed their politics, and they would have embraced it and applauded him for being a minority on this campus. But because he dared to be a conservative and speak his mind, they attacked him for it.
I thought I would err on the side of caution. I wouldn't want Submani to be confronted or maybe physically assaulted and me not have said anything.
So he emails me stuff that would put the Spanish Inquisition to shame, I think was the quote from there. Most people seem to be the most interested in was one saying that we should shoot all those ragheads in the face.
I counseled him to take this seriously, and I counseled him to bring this to the attention as per the student handbook of the Dean of Students. I think given the context and the wording, it could and probably absolutely post-Columbine be taken as a threat against his person.
The thing was, the faculty advisor knew these emails were going out, and she hadn't stopped it and done anything like that.
The woman who's supposed to be the oversight for the issues committee came out and made a statement. Oh, he was upset, and you know, we've all said stupid things before.
The notion of shooting someone in the face, even used in this day and age as a metaphor or as a joke. Well, if that email had been sent in a high school in this country, they would not have said, oh, someone's joking or got carried away, or they couldn't afford to.
So here at the University of Tennessee, you had free reign to issue death threats against a conservative.
That's how it looks.
Great things are happening at the University of Tennessee.
At first, UT just ignored the threats against Submani. But when students collected signatures to protest the handling of the case, the administration played hardball.
We saw that nothing was happening, and that prognosis was nothing was going to happen.
We decided to do a petition and just tell people what was going on. People were just shocked, and a lot of people stopped and signed a petition.
One of the members of the administration called the UT Police Department and told the officer to go down and collect the names of all the students who were at the table and to make them leave.
The cops on bikes and the nice tight shorts rolled up.
He said that an administrator had called, and we said we had to shut down.
And he's like, the dean just called me and told me to shut you down.
There were some considerable efforts to intimidate students. A professor at the University of Tennessee, who I consider a mentor and a friend, had called me into his office. Word had come down from higher up that he needed to speak with me and ask me to back off, that I was risking my standing within the political science department and within the university at large.
The faculty advisor of the committee wrote a comment in the paper saying, we're sorry that these things came out, that they were public.
Not we're sorry that they happened.
That's right.
The author of the most notorious of the emails was called in and basically given a little questioning by the dean of students. She felt that he had not violated any part of the university's code of conduct.
Really?
Yes.
Of course, this raises the whole question that political correctness and intolerance on the left against right. Yes, this occurs to me, but to me it was the language used and the implication of violence.
The administration ultimately had no punishment whatsoever, is that correct?
None.
Nothing like a fraternity being suspended.
What the five guys did was stupid, but it wasn't threatening anybody. There wasn't an email which said, shoot him in the fucking face.
Kind of makes you think there might be a double standard there.
I'm not for speech codes. I'm not for political correctness. But yes, it does show a double standard in that it violates their codes.
Has this whole experience changed your view of the university at all?
Well, you might say it's confirmed it.
I think that it reaffirms everything that we had ever thought.
This may have just increased the extent to which I've seen the university as a dogmatic leftist institution.
I decided to take a little road trip to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. If you're a hardcore fan of The Sopranos, you may remember Lewisburg for two things. Jackie Aprile spent some time there in the Lewisburg Penitentiary, and Meadow paid a visit to the town to take a tour of my alma mater, Bucknell University. I loved my 4 years at Bucknell, but I've been hearing some disturbing things lately, and I wanted to go see for myself.
America is a racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted country. It has a lot of currency here.
A lot of our students, I think, are unconsciously racist.
A few administrators have written to the local papers saying that some of us are racists.
It's not conscious, so they don't really see it in themselves.
People don't have any idea just how bad it is.
And nobody wants to admit that they're unconsciously a racist.
You hear all these things about, the evils of capitalism, blah, blah, blah.
There are still lots of Marxist studying and writing and lots of journals and things within the economics profession.
You never hear about the evils of communism. You never hear about the piles of bodies.
Yeah, imagine your typical very wealthy Bucknell student taking a course which is a critique of capitalism and often saying things like, your parents are doing awful things to people around the globe, either indirectly or directly.
Capitalism oppresses the individual. Marxism would empower the individual.
We go through the basic ideas of Marx and then updates of Marx and some of the feminist and black feminist political economy and black political economy, which kind of starts with Marxism and then goes off in different directions from there.
I'm an econ major. I've never been assigned Hayek. I've never been assigned Mises. I've never been assigned Friedman.
Black political economists and feminist political economists have improved, I think, on basic standard Marxist ideas, and that they exposed the fact that Marxist ideas haven't always dealt with race very effectively, for example, or with gender.
I know one person here, ever, that I've
the American University. For several centuries, our universities turned out bold thinkers who changed the world. From before the hopeful birth of our nation to the difficult struggle for equality, generations of great leaders sprung up from our nation's campuses. Traditionally, the mission of higher education has been to equip students with the tools necessary to think critically. Educators believed that a better society would result when people had the freedom to debate the great challenges of their time. Colleges embodied the very philosophy upon which our nation was founded, and educators recognized that their academic freedom was made possible by America's freedom. So when our country needed help, universities answered the call.
1,500 colleges throughout the nation are being converted to the war effort. In consultation with faculty and advisory officers, students are guided to the specialized training they need for war work. Servicemen with books, now a common sight on the campus.
My, how times have changed. In the wake of September 11th, a number of college campuses outlawed the display of American flags. Lehigh University removed the flag from school buses and told employees that displaying the flag is not allowed. At Central Michigan University, school officials forced students to remove flags from their dorm room doors. Arizona State removed an American flag from a cafeteria over worries that it might offend foreign students. And at Holy Cross, a secretary was told to remove a flag from her desk. She was a friend of Todd Beamer, who was killed on September 11th while trying to retake a hijacked plane. How did our campuses get this way? Was my old school like this?
Who has read Friedrich Hayek? One person.
Some of the most cutting-edge work in economics today is being done in feminist economics and in black political economy. So the students should be exposed, you would think, to the cutting-edge work in the discipline.
If you're required to study this stuff about Marxism and you're required to study Marx in this much detail, that is a value judgment.
We feel like they need to be exposed to this. This is really good stuff. This is stuff that they will benefit from learning, but it's going to conflict with their preconceived notions.
I feel like we only get one point of view.
If you were to look through the course book, you'd see across departments, there's tons of courses on gender issues, sex issues. You can't just take general history or sociology.
In too many cases, you end up with people who turn a class that is not political and make it political. I believe it was an engineering class of some sort, and it turned into a screed about how George Bush invaded Afghanistan to build an oil pipeline across the country. This was a professor who went on about it for 45 minutes in an engineering class.
Do you raise your hand and be like, "Excuse me, professor, I disagree with you," in a class where it's out of place already?
I think a lot of it's made up. I think that a lot of the bias is in the eye of the beholder.
It's not every class. You can't forget that, but it's way too often.
These are respected university professors, and they're either controlling our grades or their colleagues are.
I find when students come out of high school, they have no ability to engage in critical thinking.